June 8, 1962. The boardroom at 20th Century Fox Studios was packed with nervous executives. They'd just made one of the most controversial decisions in Hollywood history, firing Marilyn Monroe, the biggest box office star in the world, from the film Something's Got to Give. The studio heads were confident. They had legal grounds. They had backup plans. They had another actress ready to step in. What they didn't have was Dean Martin. When Dean heard the news, he walked into that same boardroom and said 7 words that would shake the entire Hollywood power structure. If Marilyn doesn't work, I don't work. What happened next wasn't just a battle between a star and a studio. It was a stand that would expose Hollywood's cruelty, challenge the system's absolute power, and prove that sometimes loyalty matters more than money. This is the story of how Dean Martin's integrity left an industry speechless. Before we dive into this incredible tale of courage and loyalty, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. This isn't just Hollywood history. It's a lesson about standing up for what's right even when it costs you everything. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and let's begin. The Golden Girl's darkest days. To understand what Dean Martin did, you need to understand what Marilyn Monroe was going through in 1962. To the world, she was the ultimate symbol of glamour and success. Her films made millions. Her image sold magazines. Her name could greenlight any project in Hollywood. But behind the platinum blonde hair and breathless voice, Marilyn was drowning. She'd recently divorced playwright Arthur Miller, her 3rd failed marriage. She was struggling with severe anxiety and depression. She couldn't sleep without pills. She couldn't face the day without more pills. Her relationships with the Kennedy brothers, President John F. Kennedy and Attorney General Robert Kennedy, were causing her intense stress and putting her in dangerous political crossfire. Most devastating of all, Hollywood had stopped seeing her as a human being. To the studio executives, Marilyn Monroe was a product, an asset, a money-making machine that was starting to malfunction. When she showed up late to set or forgot her lines, they didn't see a woman struggling with mental health issues. They saw dollar signs slipping away. Something's Got to Give was supposed to be Marilyn's comeback vehicle. A romantic comedy directed by George Cukor, co-starring Dean Martin. The studio had invested heavily in the production. They'd built elaborate sets. They'd hired top-tier crew members. Everything was riding on this film being a hit. But Marilyn kept missing work. Some days, she was too sick to leave her home. Other days, she'd arrive hours late, unable to remember her lines. The production fell further and further behind schedule. The budget ballooned. Studio executives started panicking. Dean Martin, more than just cool Dean Martin, was at the absolute peak of his career in 1962. His records topped the charts. His television variety show dominated the ratings. His nightclub performances in Las Vegas sold out within hours. He was making more money than almost anyone in entertainment. But Dean was also something rare in Hollywood, genuinely decent. Unlike many stars who surrounded themselves with yes-men and climbed over others to stay on top, Dean had a reputation for kindness. He treated crew members with respect. He remembered people's names. He showed up on time, knew his lines, and made everyone's job easier. When Dean signed on to Something's Got to Give, he did so specifically because Marilyn was the co-star. They'd worked together before on Let's Make Love in 1960, and Dean had seen firsthand how vulnerable Marilyn was beneath the movie star image. While others mocked her insecurities or took advantage of her fragility, Dean protected her. On the set of Let's Make Love, when male crew members made crude jokes about Marilyn's body, Dean shut it down immediately. "Show some respect," he'd said quietly, in that tone that made people pay attention. "She's a lady and she's a professional. Act accordingly." Marilyn never forgot that kindness. The crisis deepens. By late May 1962, Something's Got to Give was a disaster. Marilyn had only worked 12 out of 35 scheduled shooting days. The production was weeks behind schedule and hundreds of thousands of dollars over budget. Studio executives called emergency meetings. They looked at the numbers and saw catastrophe. At the rate things were going, the film would never be finished. Or if it was finished, it would cost so much that it could never turn a profit. Marilyn's contract had strict clauses about attendance and professional conduct. The studio's lawyers reviewed the language carefully. Technically, they had grounds to terminate her employment for breach of contract. But firing Marilyn Monroe wasn't a simple business decision. She was the studio's biggest star. Her last film, The Misfits, had been a critical success. Her fame was global. Firing her would create massive headlines and potentially damage the studio's reputation. On the other hand, keeping her on the film while she continued missing work would bankrupt the production. The studio was caught between public relations disaster and financial disaster, the meeting where everything changed. On June 7, 1962, 20th Century Fox executives held a crucial meeting. Present were studio head Peter LeVay's, production chief Robert Goldstein, and several board members. They went through the numbers one more time. The conclusion was unavoidable. Marilyn had to go. "We'll fire her tomorrow morning," LeVay's announced. "Legal will deliver the termination notice. We'll put out a statement saying it was a mutual decision based on creative differences." The public doesn't need to know about the contract violations. "What about Dean Martin?" someone asked. "He's contractually obligated to the film too." LeVay's waved dismissively. "Dean's a professional. He'll understand it's a business decision. We'll get another actress, maybe Lee Remick, and Dean will work with whoever we cast. He's too smart to walk away from a major studio picture." The executives nodded in agreement. Dean Martin was known for being easygoing, laid back, and non-confrontational. He'd grumble perhaps, but ultimately he'd accept the situation and move forward. That was the smart career move, and Dean Martin was a smart businessman. They had no idea how wrong they were. June 8th. The termination at 9 a.m. on Friday, June 8th. Marilyn Monroe received a phone call from Fox's legal department. They were formal and cold. "Miss Monroe, your services on Something's Got to Give are no longer required. You are in breach of contract. This constitutes formal termination of your employment on this production." Marilyn, sitting in her bedroom in her Brentwood home, barely reacted. Some part of her had been expecting this. Hollywood had been looking for a reason to discard her for years. Now they had won. She hung up the phone and sat there in silence. At 36 years old, her career, the thing she'd sacrificed everything for, the identity she'd built from nothing, was crumbling. Within hours, the news would be everywhere. Everyone would know she'd been fired. Every studio in town would see her as unreliable, toxic, unemployable. Marilyn's closest friends later said that June 8th was one of her darkest days. She didn't leave her bedroom. She didn't answer calls. She just sat there, staring at nothing, wondering if Hollywood would ever give her another chance. Dean gets the news. Dean Martin was having lunch at the Beverly Hills Hotel when his agent called. "Dean, we've got a situation. Fox fired Marilyn this morning. They want to recast with Lee Remick and resume filming next week. Your contract obligates you to complete the picture regardless of cast changes." There was a long silence on the line. "Dean, did you hear me? Production wants you back on set Monday with a new actress." Dean's voice, when he finally spoke, was quiet but firm. "Tell them I need to think about it. I'll have an answer by end of day." His agent sighed with relief. Thinking about it meant Dean was being reasonable, considering his options, preparing to accept the situation. That was good. The agent could work with that. But Dean wasn't thinking about accepting anything. He was thinking about Marilyn sitting alone in her house right now, probably devastated, probably wondering if anyone in this town actually gave a damn about her as a human being. He was thinking about all the times he'd seen studio executives chew up and spit out talented people who'd made them millions of dollars. He was thinking about how he'd watched Hollywood destroy Judy Garland's health with pills and impossible demands, then blame her when she couldn't maintain their inhuman pace. He was thinking that somebody needed to stand up and say this wasn't okay. And if that somebody had to be him, then so be it. Dean makes his decision. Dean Martin didn't make rash decisions. He thought things through, weighed the consequences, understood the risks. So when he decided what he was going to do about Marilyn's firing, he did it with full knowledge of what it would cost him. First, he called Frank Sinatra. Frank and Dean were best friends. but they also had very different approaches to studio conflicts. Frank was famous for fighting with executives, walking off sets, and generally refusing to be controlled by anyone. Dean had always been more diplomatic. "Frank, they fired Marilyn," Dean said simply. "Those bastards," Frank replied immediately. "What are you going to do?" "I'm thinking about walking." There was a pause. Then Frank said something that surprised Dean. "Dino, think carefully about this. If you walk, they'll sue you for millions. They'll blackball you. Every studio in town will see you as difficult to work with. You could lose everything." "I know. And you're still thinking about doing it?" "Yeah, Pally. I am." Frank laughed, a sound of admiration mixed with concern. "Then you're crazier than I am. But if you do it big. Don't half-ass a stand like this. Make them feel it." Understanding what was at stake. To fully appreciate what Dean was considering, you need to understand what he was risking. Dean's contract with 20th Century Fox wasn't just for something's got to give. It was a multi-picture deal worth millions of dollars. If he refused to complete this film, the studio could 1. Sue him for breach of contract, potentially for more money than he'd made in his entire career. 2. Blacklist him from working with any major studio. 3. Destroy his reputation as a professional and team player. 4. Tank his other business ventures through negative publicity. 5. Impact his television show, his recording contracts, his nightclub performances, everything. Dean had a family to support, ex-wives to pay alimony to, kids in expensive schools, a lifestyle that required constant income. Walking away from Fox could destroy all of that. His agent begged him to reconsider. "Dean, be smart about this. Marilyn is finished anyway. The studios won't hire her again. Your standing up for her won't change that. All it will do is end your career too." His business manager showed him numbers. "If they sue you and win, you'll be paying them for the next 20 years. Everything you've built will be gone." Even some of his friends advised against it. "It's tragic what happened to Marilyn, but this is business. You can't sacrifice yourself for someone else's problems." But Dean kept thinking about something his father had told him when he was young. "Dino, there are times when doing the right thing costs you. Those are the times when doing the right thing matters most." The phone call to Marilyn. Before making his final decision, Dean did something that most people in Hollywood never learned about. He called Marilyn directly. "Sweetheart, it's Dean," he said when she answered. "I heard what happened. How are you doing?" Marilyn's voice was small, fragile. "I've been better, Dean. I guess this is it for me. No studio will touch me now." "Listen to me," Dean said, his voice firm. "You're a talented actress and a good person. What Fox did to you is wrong. They should have helped you instead of throwing you away." "That's sweet of you to say, but I'm not just saying it to be nice. I mean it. And I want you to know something. I'm not doing this picture without you." There was silence on the line. Then Marilyn said, "Dean, you can't do that. They'll destroy you." "Maybe. But I can't look at myself in the mirror if I just go along with this. You deserved better than what they did to you." Marilyn started crying. In an industry where people would stab you in the back for a better parking space, here was Dean Martin, a man who had everything to lose and nothing to gain, preparing to risk his career for her. "Don't do this for me," she whispered. "I'm not worth it." "Yes, you are," Dean said firmly. "And it's not just for you. It's for every actor who gets treated like property instead of a person. Somebody needs to push back. Might as well be me." June 11th, Dean's declaration. On Monday morning, June 11th, Dean Martin arrived at 20th Century Fox Studios unannounced. He walked past security, past the production offices, straight to the executive suite, where Peter LaVeyes and the other studio heads were preparing for a meeting about recasting Something's Got to Give. Dean didn't knock. He just opened the door and walked in. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice calm but cold, "I'm here to make something very clear. I signed on to make a picture with Marilyn Monroe. My contract specifically lists her as my co-star. That's the deal I agreed to." LaVeyes stood up. "Dean, let's talk about this reasonably." "I'm being reasonable," Dean interrupted. I'm simply holding you to the same contract standards you held Marilyn to. She's in my contract. Without her, I have no obligation to complete this film. We can cast another actress of equal stature." "There is no actress of equal stature," Dean said flatly. "Marilyn Monroe is the biggest star in the world. Nobody you recast will be equal to that. And even if they were, that's not the point." "Then what is the point?" Goldstein asked, his voice sharp with frustration. Dean looked at each executive in turn. "The point is that you treated Marilyn like garbage. She was struggling, and instead of helping her, you threw her away. That's not how you treat people. I don't care how much money is involved." The studio's threats. The executives tried every tactic they could think of. First, they tried reasoning ****. "Dean, this is a business. We have investors to answer to. We can't keep paying for days when our star doesn't show up." Dean's response: "Then you should have gotten her the help she needed instead of just counting lost dollars." Then they tried appealing to his professionalism ***. "You've always been so easy to work with. Don't ruin your reputation over this." Dean's response: "My reputation will survive. Will yours?" Then they tried financial pressure. "Your contract is ironclad. If you refuse to work, we'll sue you for every penny you have." Dean's response: "Go ahead. I'll see you in court." Finally, they tried threats ***. "If you do this, you'll never work for a major studio again. We'll make sure of it." Dean stood up, buttoned his jacket, and delivered the line that would become legendary. "If Marilyn doesn't work, I don't work. Sue me, blackball me, do whatever you want. But I'm not making your picture without her. Are we clear?" The room fell completely silent. Peter LeVay's face turned red. "You're making a huge mistake, Dean." "Maybe," Dean said, "but it's my mistake to make." He walked out, leaving a room full of stunned executives trying to figure out what had just happened. Hollywood's reaction. News of Dean's stand spread through Hollywood within hours. The reaction was mixed and intense. Some people thought he was crazy. Dean Martin just committed career suicide over Marilyn Monroe. She's finished anyway. What's the point? Some people admired him. Finally, someone with the guts to stand up to the studios. Good for Dean. Some people were cynical. It's a publicity stunt. He'll back down once the lawyers get involved. But the people who knew Dean best weren't surprised at all. Frank Sinatra told reporters, "That's Dean. When he decides something is right, you can't move him. The studios better be ready for a fight." Sammy Davis Jr. said, "Dean's always been the most loyal guy I know. He's not doing this for publicity. He's doing it because it's who he is." The lawsuit. On June 15, 1962, 20th Century Fox filed a lawsuit against Dean Martin for breach of contract. They sued for $3.3 million, an astronomical sum in 1962 dollars. They also filed for an injunction preventing him from working on any other film projects until the dispute was resolved. Dean's legal team was blunt. "You're going to lose this case. Your contract is clear. You have no legal grounds to walk away." "I know," Dean said. "Then why are you doing this?" "Because some things matter more than winning." The lawsuit made national headlines. Newspapers ran stories with headlines like "Dean Martin risks career for fired co-star" and "Martin versus Fox, the battle that could end a career." Editorials debated whether Dean was noble or foolish. Legal experts predicted he'd lose everything. Entertainment industry insiders said this was the beginning of the end for Dean Martin's time as a Hollywood A-lister. But Dean didn't back down. He couldn't work on other projects because of the injunction, which cost him millions in lost income. But he held firm. No Marilyn, no Dean. The unexpected turn. For 3 months, the standoff continued. Fox tried to proceed with Lee Remick as Marilyn's replacement, but the project felt cursed. The chemistry wasn't there. The crew's morale was terrible. The bad publicity around Marilyn's firing had damaged the film's prospects. Then, in August, something shifted. Studio executives, facing mounting costs and negative press, quietly approached Dean's representatives with a proposition. What if they agreed to rehire Marilyn? Dean's response was immediate. Tell them to call Marilyn directly and make it right. But before negotiations could really begin, tragedy struck. August 5, 1962. The phone rang in Dean Martin's home at 6:30 a.m. It was Frank Sinatra, and he was crying, something Dean had almost never heard. "Dino, Marilyn's dead." Dean felt the world tilt. "What?" "They found her this morning. Pills. They're saying it might be suicide, but, oh God, Dino, she's gone." Dean hung up and sat down heavily. The woman he'd been fighting for, the person whose dignity he'd risked everything to defend, was dead at 36 years old. All the legal battles, all the principles, all the standing up to the studio, none of it had saved her. The guilt hit him immediately. Should he have done more? Should he have gone to her house, forced his way in, gotten her help? Should he have fought harder, faster, louder? His wife Barbara found him in his study hours later, still sitting in the same chair, staring at nothing. "Dean, honey, I failed her," Dean said quietly. "I thought standing up to the studio would matter. I thought it would show her that someone cared, but I failed her." "You didn't fail her," Barbara said firmly. "You were the only one who fought for her, the only one who put your career on the line." She knew that. It mattered to her. The investigation and cover-up. Marilyn's death was immediately controversial. The official ruling was probable suicide from an overdose of barbiturates. But many people, including some of her closest friends, doubted that conclusion. There were too many questions. Why were there no pill bottles found near her body initially? Why did the timeline of events keep changing? Why were her phone records from that night mysteriously missing? What about her rumored relationships with John and Robert Kennedy? Dean had his own suspicions, but he never spoke about them publicly. Years later, he told Frank Sinatra privately, "I think she knew too much, and powerful people wanted her silent. But we'll never know for sure." What Dean didn't know was that Hollywood had failed Marilyn Monroe. The system that had made her a star had also destroyed her. The studio executives who'd fired her were the same people who demanded she take pills to stay thin, pills to stay awake for 18-hour shoot days, pills to help her sleep after those impossible days. They treated her like a product that was malfunctioning, and when the malfunctioning became too expensive, they discarded her. Dean's stand had been about challenging that dehumanizing system, but he'd been too late to save Marilyn from it. The funeral. Marilyn Monroe's funeral was held on August 8, 1962, at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery. It was a small, private ceremony, just 31 people invited by Marilyn's ex-husband Joe DiMaggio, who'd taken control of the arrangements. Joe specifically excluded almost everyone from Hollywood. No studio executives, no photographers, no celebrities except for a very select few who genuinely cared about Marilyn as a person rather than as a commodity. Dean Martin was invited. So was Frank Sinatra. The fact that they made the guest list when major stars like Peter Lawford and even President Kennedy were excluded spoke volumes about who Joe believed had truly cared for Marilyn. Dean attended with Barbara. He sat quietly during the service, his face unreadable behind dark sunglasses. When someone suggested he say a few words, he shook his head. "I didn't do right by her when she was alive," he said. "I'm not going to use her death to make myself feel better." After the service, Joe DiMaggio approached Dean privately. The two men had never been close, but Joe knew what Dean had done, how he'd risked his career fighting for Marilyn when everyone else had abandoned her. "Thank you," Joe said simply, extending his hand. Dean shook it, tears finally falling behind his sunglasses. "I should have done more." "You did what almost nobody else did," Joe replied. "You treated her like she mattered. She knew that. She told me about it. It meant everything to her." The studio's reversal. With Marilyn's death dominating headlines and public opinion turning against how Hollywood treated its stars, 20th Century Fox found itself in an impossible position. The lawsuit against Dean Martin suddenly looked not like a righteous defense of contract law, but like a major studio bullying an actor who tried to protect a vulnerable woman. Newspaper editorials started questioning the studio's handling of the situation. If Fox had shown Marilyn Monroe the loyalty that Dean Martin showed her, would she still be alive? The bad publicity was devastating. Actors started speaking out about how studios treated talent like disposable assets. The public, mourning Marilyn, was not sympathetic to corporate legal arguments about contract breaches. On September 10, 1962, 20th Century Fox quietly dropped their lawsuit against Dean Martin. The official statement was carefully worded. In light of recent tragic events and after careful consideration, the studio and Mr. Martin have reached a mutual understanding to conclude their legal dispute. Translation: the studio realized they couldn't win the public relations battle, even if they won the legal case. Dean's lawyer called to tell him the news. "You won, Dean. They're dropping everything." But Dean didn't feel like he'd won anything. Marilyn was still dead. The system was still broken. All he'd proven was that it took a major star risking millions of dollars to stand up for basic human decency. And even that hadn't been enough to save Marilyn's life. What Dean did next? Instead of celebrating his legal victory, Dean Martin did something that stunned Hollywood. He negotiated a settlement that included a $1 million donation to mental health charities in Marilyn Monroe's name. The money came from a combination of Dean's own funds and contributions he leveraged from Fox Studios as part of dropping the legal case. The donation went to organizations working on mental health awareness, addiction treatment, and support for people in the entertainment industry struggling with similar issues. Dean also quietly established a fund that paid for therapy and addiction treatment for actors, crew members, and other entertainment industry workers who couldn't afford help. He funded it anonymously for years, and most people who benefited from it never knew where the money came from. He never talked about this publicly. He didn't hold press conferences. He didn't seek credit. He just did it because that's who Dean Martin was. The industry changes. Dean's stand, combined with Marilyn's death, sparked genuine conversations in Hollywood about how the industry treated its talent. It didn't fix everything. Hollywood was still ruthless, still prioritized profits over people. But small changes started happening. Studios began including mental health support in contracts. There was more awareness about the dangers of demanding impossible work schedules. Actors felt slightly more empowered to speak up about unfair treatment. The absolute power of studio executives was questioned in ways it hadn't been before. Dean never took credit for any of these changes, but people in the industry knew. His willingness to risk everything to stand up for Marilyn had cracked open a door that couldn't be completely closed again. The personal cost. The fight with Fox Studios cost Dean Martin approximately $5 million in lost wages, legal fees, and opportunities that dried up during the months of legal battle. His television show's ratings dipped because of the negative publicity. Some sponsors pulled out, nervous about being associated with controversy. But Dean never expressed regret. In later interviews, when asked about the incident, he was characteristically understated. Marilyn was a good person who deserved better than what she got. I did what I thought was right. Wouldn't change a thing. Friends said privately that Marilyn's death haunted Dean for the rest of his life. He rarely talked about it, but every August, on the anniversary of her death, Dean would become quiet and withdrawn. Barbara knew to give him space on those days. Frank Sinatra once said, "Dean blamed himself for not saving her. I told him nobody could have saved her. The system had broken her long before that last night." But Dean, he never forgave himself for not trying harder. The legacy of a stand. Dean Martin's stand against 20th Century Fox over Marilyn Monroe's firing became legendary in Hollywood. Not because it saved Marilyn's life, it didn't. And not because it destroyed the studio system, it didn't. But because it was a perfect example of choosing principle over profit. In an industry built on compromise, calculation, and self-interest, Dean had done something radical. He'd risked everything for someone else's dignity. He hadn't done it for publicity. He hadn't done it expecting to win. He'd done it simply because it was the right thing to do. That kind of integrity was rare in Hollywood in 1962. It's even rarer today. What we learn about true loyalty. Dean Martin's actions teach us several profound lessons about loyalty and standing up for others. 1. Real loyalty costs something. It's easy to support people when it's convenient, when there's no risk involved, when you know you'll be rewarded for it. Dean showed us that real loyalty means standing up for someone even when it costs you everything. He risked $5 million, his reputation, his career, everything he'd spent decades building, to make a point about human dignity. That's not just loyalty. That's love in action. 2. You don't have to win to do the right thing. Dean couldn't save Marilyn's life. His stand didn't prevent her death. In some ways, he lost this battle. But he still chose to fight it, because the principle mattered more than the outcome. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't change the final result. You do it anyway, because your integrity isn't about winning. It's about who you are and what you stand for. 3. Your actions speak louder than your words. Hollywood was full of people who said nice things about Marilyn Monroe at her funeral. They gave beautiful eulogies. They cried for the cameras. They mourned publicly. But when she was alive and needed someone to fight for her, almost all of them were silent. Dean was the one who actually did something, who put his money where his mouth was, who backed up his concern with action. It's a reminder that our true values are revealed not in what we say, but in what we're willing to sacrifice. 4. The system won't change unless someone stands up. Hollywood in 1962 treated actors, especially actresses, as disposable products. Everyone knew it was wrong. Everyone complained about it privately. But most people just accepted it as the way things are. Dean refused to accept it. His stand didn't overthrow the studio system, but it cracked it. It made executives think twice. It empowered other actors to speak up. It showed that the system could be challenged. Change never happens until someone is willing to be the first person to say no to an unjust system, even when saying no comes at tremendous personal cost. 5. Grief and guilt are normal when you lose someone. Dean blamed himself for not saving Marilyn, even though her death wasn't his fault. That guilt is a normal part of loving someone and losing them. You always wonder, could I have done more? Could I have saved them? The answer is often no. Some people are fighting battles you can't win for them. But that doesn't mean trying wasn't worth it. Dean's stand mattered to Marilyn. Joe DiMaggio confirmed it. Even if it didn't save her life, it showed her that someone saw her as a human being worth fighting for. Sometimes that's all we can do. Show up, fight for people, and hope it's enough. And when it's not enough, we have to find a way to live with that grief while honoring the person we lost. Marilyn's own words. Shortly before her death, Marilyn Monroe gave an interview where she was asked about Dean Martin's stand on her behalf. Her response was heartbreaking and beautiful. Dean is a real friend. Not a Hollywood friend, a real one. He didn't have to do what he did. It would have been easier for him to just move on. But he fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself anymore. That means more than I can say. Those words haunt everyone who knew the story. Dean fought for Marilyn. She knew it. She appreciated it. But she still couldn't escape the darkness that the Hollywood system and her own struggles had created. How this applies to your life. You probably don't work in Hollywood. You're not fighting major studios or negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts. But the lessons from Dean Martin's stand apply to all of us. In your workplace, ***, when you see someone being treated unfairly, do you speak up? Even if it might cost you your job or your relationship with your boss. In your community, ***, when you see injustice, do you challenge it? Or do you tell yourself, that's just how things are? In your friendships, ***, when someone you care about is struggling, do you show up? Not just with words of encouragement, but with actual support that might inconvenience you or cost you something. Dean Martin showed us that integrity means backing up your values with action, even when, especially when, that action comes at a price you'd rather not pay. The question Dean's story asks us. Here's the uncomfortable question that Dean Martin's stand forces us to confront. What are you willing to sacrifice to stand up for what's right? Most of us like to think we'd be heroes in important moments. We'd stand up to injustice. We'd protect the vulnerable. We'd risk everything for our principles. But would we? When the actual moment comes, when standing up means losing money, damaging your reputation, jeopardizing your career, would you do it? Dean Martin did. He showed us what it actually looks like to put your money where your mouth is, to back up your values with costly action, to choose integrity over comfort. The final truth. Dean Martin didn't save Marilyn Monroe's life, but he gave her something precious in her final months. The knowledge that someone saw her as a human being worth fighting for. In an industry that treated her as a commodity, Dean treated her as a friend. In a system that discarded her when she became inconvenient, Dean said, "She matters more than your profits." That didn't prevent her death, but it wasn't meaningless either. It was a statement about what kind of person Dean was and what kind of world he wanted to live in. A world where people matter more than money, where loyalty means something, where standing up for others is more important than protecting yourself. Marilyn Monroe died too young, in tragic circumstances, after a life full of pain that most of us can barely imagine. But in her final months, at least one person with real power in Hollywood stood up and said, "She deserves better." That's Dean Martin's legacy. Not just the songs, the movies, the laughs, or the cool persona. It's the moment when he looked at a powerful system treating someone cruelly and said, "If Marilyn doesn't work, I don't work." 7 words that left Hollywood speechless. 7 words that define what real loyalty looks like. 7 words that challenge all of us to be better, braver, and more willing to sacrifice for what we believe in. Your turn. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that standing up for others matters, even when it's hard. And ask yourself, is there someone in your life who needs you to fight for them right now? Someone being treated unfairly? Someone who's struggling and needs someone in their corner?